Okay, hello and welcome to the Repro Spot, the podcast that provides information about dairy reproductive management. My name is Victor Gomez Leon, and I'm an extension specialist for Kansas State University.
My name is Jennifer Spencer, and I'm an extension dairy specialist for Texas A&M University. Today we're here with Dr. Lima, a professor at UC Davis Veterinary Medicine, who has worked with reproductive programs for dairy cattle management and more recently, the interactions of genomics with reproduction.
It's a great honor to have you here with us today. Welcome to the Repro Spot.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you very much, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always fun to have an opportunity to discuss reproductive management and related topics in dairy cows.
So, Fabio, can you explain to us what has happened with dairy cattle fertility over the last decades in the United States?
So, if we just take a look and try to put in a timeline what occurred in terms of reproductive performance, in 1960 is when the United States Department of Agriculture created initiate the start of assessments of reproductive performance, and they create this trait that's called daughter pregnancy rate or pregnancy rate. So it can be measured from the lens of the sire, it can be less from the lens of the daughters of that specific sire. So it's measured in the female, but you can always create a parameter in relate to the male, and that is it start and it's based on the whole population, the whole data collected in the United States through the dairy herd improvement, and they look into that tendency throughout the years, and what they saw that from 1960 to early 2000, there was a gradual decline in the daughter pregnancy rate, looking from the lens of the sire or looking for the lens of the cow, whatever you look at, doesn't matter how you slice it. It was not going in a direction that was desirable, let's put it this way. On the other hand, one of the traits that was highly desirable and probably the one that most effort was put into, it was select cows for improved milk production. Okay, in that trait, geneticists and everyone working in the industry were very successful to see a gradual increase in milk production throughout the year. So our modern dairy cow produced 2.5 times more than the dairy cow of the late 1950s, and that's substantial. And then people started looking into those traits, and they were like, well, when you think from a biological point, this we see is an antagonistic relationship, right? So when you think like, well, milk's going up, repro's going down, that's a problematic situation. But to make a long story short, so when we look at the results from 2000 to 2020, if we look at what's happening with that decline in daughter pregnancy rate, it has been halted. Now it's slightly going up. It's not like going the other way completely, but slightly. And other reproductive traits like cow conception rate, which is start being measured in the 2000, is actually going up. And the days open, which is kind of it's a function is related to it, it's thought to go up. The days open, it's the days from calving to conception or pregnancy, to be more accurate. That actually also go in the right direction. So we have seen remarkable improvements in reproductive performance. So nowadays, you can go and visit dairy farms. They're having performance that they were just unprecedented before the 2000s. So you have a lot of dairy farms that when we look at this 21-day cycle pregnancy rate, that's kind of like a common measure of fertility. They are on the 30s. That it was absolutely rare, and now it's a benchmark that it's achievable, and there are several farms that are actually approaching that, and some that are there already.
So Fabio, let me pick up there. It's daughter pregnancy rate, the main parameter, and what it is.
So if you go by the strict definition that the USDA have, it is basically, it's defined as the percentage of non-pregnant cows that become pregnant during each 21-day cycle. So for all the eligible on that 21 cycle, how become pregnant, and 1 point imply that the daughter of that specific pool, it's 1.1% more likely to become pregnant during that 21-day cycle. Okay. And 0 means the average of the hosting population, for example, is using the breeding as the hosting. Okay. And each 1% translates into a predicted transmittability of daughter pregnancy rate of 4 days open, approximately, just to give you a ballpark. So if the animal increase from 20 to 21, if the days open average was 60, it's going to be 56. Just give an example, just kind of hypothetical.
How come that we are selecting for better daughter pregnancy rate and we still see some increase in milk production?
That's an excellent question, and it's part of what I have been interested to understand, because I think it's very few people will completely deny that those traits at least in part antagonistic, but and that's why research is so interesting, because when you just say antagonist, people think in absolute yes and no. It never is like that. It's always a spectrum, right? What we want to find, it's a spectrum on which we can still move our causal distribution on the positive aspect, right? So what we think is, so the studies that were conducted, there was a study that we published in the Journal of Dairy Science back in 2020. And we look all a variety of responses, and we had over 4,000 dairy cows, primiparos, multiparos, 4 different farms. And what we will look into these relationships between, so we did to be able to analyze the data the way we separate the data. We separate them in quartiles. So we have like the quartiles, the high quartiles for genomic prediction of daughter pregnancy rate, and we have our quartiles of milk production animals that were in the higher quartile. Okay, so make a long story short, if we look within that higher quartile of milk production in the higher quartile of daughter pregnancy rate, what we can see is that you have a part of the population that will fit there. And then even though there is some negative associations, there is enough variability within the spectrum that you can select for both. Okay. Of course, if you push too strong on one end, yeah, they push the other and the other opposite. But the point is, if you are a bit more, if you modulate, like if you go like, all right, I don't want to get anything that it's minus 500 on my milk production when I'm selecting my bulls, but also don't want to get anything that's minus 2 on the DPR. If you kind of are a little bit more, let's say, cognizant of what you're selecting for, you should probably, even though the contributions are, let's say, not like I say gigantic, so they will happen on the right direction. I think that's what the data that I look at. So I think there's about 5 different studies that came out in the last 2 or 3 years. Study on our data here in the US. There was a study from Vasconcelos group that it's from Brazil. There's a study from a group in Ireland, another from New Zealand and Japan. So all over, people are looking into the similar traits. So they have different names, they might measure it slightly different, but the idea is the same. So how does that pan out, the association between selecting animals for higher fertility traits compared to selecting for milk production? And the message across the board is that there is enough variability within the fertility trait spectrum that we can select animals to improve fertility without pushing the trait milk production way down. So if you think just in terms of heritability, obviously milk production is much more powerful. We have a much higher heritability. It's like 6 times greater, 7 times greater heritability for milk than it is for reproductive trait. So we're gonna see always a much quicker increase in milk than we see in real. But it's the compound effect. What people forget is like when you ignore something, you do nothing about it. Yeah, over time it builds up. It's just how it is. So if you let that unchecked, say like, no, just get our young animals that are better genetics, just breed them, things are gonna be fine. Not necessarily.
So in your opinion, why do you think producers should look at sires with good GDPRs? Or how would they be able to kind of incorporate that into one of their selection methods when selecting for sires?
So I think what we have to make them cognizant is like you have to look at your specific herd, because context, it's very important. Okay, so for example, if you are a producer that has a very tight menu, you're consistent getting over 30, that perhaps it doesn't mean that you should not look at DPR, but you don't need to be as strict with your criteria. You don't need to say like, I'm only going to use pools that are above 2 for DPR. Maybe you can allow yourself to have those above 0, perhaps. You don't want to go negative, perhaps. You can. Well, I mean, this is hypothetical examples. There might be some bulls that are negative, but they are so good for longevity, for milk production, for solids, for other things. Net merit that's to the roof. That you're still gonna use it. You just. I think the point is producers need to be aware that if you completely forget about that, that's negative. Okay, that is negative on the long run. You might not see it short term, but some of those gains, the potential could be a function of GDPR. We still don't know. So if you look back at the responses that we investigate up to this point, estrus seems to be favored by GDPR, the behavior of estrus, and the behavior of estrus, it's positively associated with pregnancy outcomes. Okay, so maybe if you're relying on like automatic systems and you forget about that can suffer over time. So some of the questions that I received, like, what if we in the future tend to go using less and less time? Are the genomic selection saving us from that? That still needs to be investigated from my perspective, because I think the response, when you look at the ultimate, at least I would consider the ultimate response, that is pregnancy. That improves in animals that are being inseminated using estrus synchronization programs, timed AI, and improves in animals that are inseminating estrus. Independent of the parity, independent if they're heifers or not, improvements are there. Okay, so the question is, how are these improvements being mediated? Part could be that these animals that are having high GDPR, it seems that they have a little bit higher estradiol at the time close to the insemination. It seems that they have a better behavior. It seems that might translate into potentially an ovulation in the development of a corpus that might be large, but people haven't assessed those things.
But Fabio, we want to thank you for all the knowledge you have shared with us, the good research, everything you have done for the dairy industry, trying to solve and find responses for these big questions. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your work sharing those things with us. Thanks to everybody for listening to the Reproduction today. Just as a reminder, we were with Dr. Fabio Lima from UC Davis. And if you have questions, please contact myself, Victor Gomez at K-State, or Jennifer Spencer at Texas A&M. We hope you had a great day, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Victor. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and have this conversation with you and Jennifer. I mean, it's very fun to have this opportunity.
Thanks, Javier. It was really fun.